And there it is. And there it is. Brian Daboll is no longer the head coach of the New York Giants. A correct move from the organization and something that was bound to happen after what we witnessed yesterday against the Bears. The fourth time in which the Giants blew a massive fourth quarter lead on the road. It finally happened. Terrific, amazing. The first step to this organization getting this right and building around Jackson Dart. And not just saying the talent, but the organization as a whole, the coaching staff, the GM, all of this needs to come together in order to build a football team that can compete with a franchise quarterback. They have the foundation. They have the talent. And now the head coach, who is quite frankly a joke, he was a joke, is gone. He is no more as the Giants head coach. And we're going to talk about it. And this worked out really well. This worked out well. Nothing better to do. Was sitting on my couch, finally got this news. And it's something that I said yesterday in Sean and I's reaction pod on One Giant Step. I said there's no way that Brian Daboll will be the head coach of the Giants this time tomorrow. There's just no chance. After Sean's report that the Giants were going to fire Brian Daboll after the Broncos game, and John Mara was talked out of it after what happened yesterday, there was no excuses. There's no like behind the scenes explanation and justification as for keeping Brian Daboll. And it happened. And Brian Daboll's legacy will be that of a head coach that peaked in his first year and then proceeded to do nothing in his 3 years after that. And you know, I think a lot of people out there want to point the blame at the defensive coordinator. They want to put the blame on Joe Schoen for the kicking situation and the lack of depth, especially in the secondary. And that's valid. That's fair. We will get to that at a later date. Trust me, we will. But now let's focus on this. Let's focus on Brian Daboll being fired. We'll cross that bridge when it comes to Joe Schoen when we get there. He will not be fired this season. Maybe, whatever happens in the offseason, whatever happens. But the rest of the season, I'm confident that Joe Schoen will continue to be the head coach or the GM. And I'm sorry, this is all fluid. I'm sure that they're going to announce it if they haven't already about who the head. Yeah, okay. Kafka. Mike Kafka is the new head coach of the New York Giants, the interim head coach. Not surprising whatsoever. And now, you look at the situation. You look at who the Giants have talent-wise. There was no reason why the Giants should have been 2-8. Who builds that culture? Who sets the tone for the organization? And again, there were a multitude of reasons why the Giants were 2-8. And it wasn't just because of Brian Daboll. But when you look at that terrible defensive coordinator the Giants employ in Shane Bowen, yeah, Joe Schoen hired him, but no good defensive coordinator around the NFL wanted to come coach for Brian Daboll. That's why they were stuck with Shane Bowen. And that's why they continue to stick by him. So, I mean, this had to happen. It had to happen. And now, it's just finally we get some good news in Giants land. It's been a long time. It's been a month since that Eagles game. And Brian Daboll, thank you for drafting Jackson Dart. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Thank you. Thanks. You've got a good eye for a quarterback. And Brian Daboll will likely be an offensive coordinator somewhere else. Another team will hire him. And you want to know why? Because he's a great offensive mind. It's just he is not, I'm going to use the word maturity. He's not mature enough to be a head coach in the NFL. He's a loose cannon. He's a maniac. And sometimes that's good. But at the end of the day, in the locker room, you need to be able to command the room. You need to be able to have power over your roster. And every player on the Giants said the right things. After pathetic loss, after pathetic loss, after pathetic loss, they said the right things. But you can't tell me there was no fracture in that locker room. And you cannot tell me that the captains of that team, the leaders behind the scenes, didn't think negatively of Brian Daboll. Yeah, listen, I could sense it. You could sense it. The media could sense it. That guy was a clown. And he wasn't being taken seriously by the players, by the media, by other coaches that potentially could have been hired by the Giants. They had to give Kafka the associate head coaching role just so he didn't leave. Just so he didn't go and take a lateral job. He didn't have a lateral move. They had to extend the olive branch to him after there was beef over the play calling last year. So, oh, sir, Mike Kafka, please come back because we're not going to be able to find another offensive coordinator because no one takes our head coach seriously. And now that guy is gone. Good riddance. See ya. And there are going to be some very difficult decisions for the Giants going forward. But this is the first step in the right direction for this organization. There's a lot to be made about, the potential GM search with John Mara, unfortunately, being near his death. I mean, from what I've heard, the cancer isn't good. And, obviously prayers to him. You could hate him. You could despise him for the nepotism and all the different stuff, the meddling, but he's a human being. And he's an owner that's, presided over 2 Super Bowls. So again, I've said this a lot, prayers to John Mara. But at this point, there are some concerns about whether a guy who is, nearing the end can preside over a GM search. And there's a lot of incompetence from Joe Schoen. Again, the kicking situation, the lack of depth in the secondary, the atrocious signings of James Hudson, and the re-signing of Darius Slayton. These are terrible moves. Bringing in a competent head coach, bringing in a guy that commands respect from the locker room, that commands respect from other coaches, will do wonders for this team. They have the structure. They have the talent. All of that has been built. And again, you get the good and you get the bad with Joe Schoen. He's drafted very well over the last 2 years. The 2 drafts before that, inexcusable. You're not going to find many people who disagree with that. But I think his last 2 drafts have earned him some leeway here. If he botched the last 2 drafts like he did the first 2 drafts, he would have been fired today along with Brian Daboll. But he wasn't. And there are reasons behind that. And again, if you're just joining now, thank you. You could sense that you could see what we're talking about. Brian Daboll 3 weeks ago was almost fired by John Mara after the Broncos game. After the Broncos scored 33 points in the 4th quarter. But cooler heads prevailed, and then it happened again. It happened again yesterday. The writing was on the wall. There was no way the Giants could continue rolling with this clown as the head coach, who constantly put a stain on this organization. So good riddance. Good riddance. And it's, I'm not going to say it's bittersweet, because he did draft and was the one behind the Jackson Dart pick. So thank you for that. The guy did not deserve to stay on as the head coach of the New York Giants. And yeah, you could have waited till after the bye week. You could have waited till the end of the season. What's the point of that? What do you have to lose firing him now? What do you have to lose firing the head coach that just allowed another 4th quarter comeback? The 4th one on the road, in which the Giants were up by double digits. That type of stuff cannot happen. That type of stuff does not help a coach keep his job. Of course, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that. Brian Daboll was a terrible head coach. He got lucky his first year because of a cupcake schedule and because of his overusage of Saquon Barkley and because Daniel Jones didn't have a bad season. He was consistent. That's all the Giants needed in that spot. They had a million takeaways. Xavier McKinney was turning into one of the best safeties in the league. It was a perfect storm of everything. They won a playoff game. The Vikings are incompetent. Daniel Jones played a perfect game. And it's unfortunate because we all sat here and thought the Giants have a future. The Giants have their head coach, the coach of the year. And man, who could have predicted how incompetent and inept this organization has looked over the last 3 years since him winning coach of the year? Now let me get to some comments here because I see I see your comments here. Wellesley says, "Thank God, now get rid of Joe now." I really think that that's a conversation that we can have down the line. I want to focus on Brian Daboll here. He's the one who was fired. There is obviously an argument to be made that Joe Schoen deserves to go as well. Okay, I get it. I'm acknowledging that. I am not sitting here as a proponent of Joe Schoen staying on as the GM of the Giants, okay? You're not going to hear that from me. You might hear it from other people. There are a lot of Joe Schoen defenders out there. They're dwindling by the day. I am not necessarily one of them, but I'm also not one that's like, please fire him. He needs to go. He's a terrible GM. He's drafted really well. Yeah, the Giants were 2-8 this year. Yes, the Giants lost another game this year because of their kicking situation. I understand that. You can't tell me right now the Giants are in a much better position when it comes to their talent to win than when he took over from Dave Gettleman. You can't tell me that. Wellesley also says he's an okay offensive mind at best. There are at least 10 better in the league. I'm assuming you're talking about Brian Daboll. I'd argue 20 better in the league. 10 is kind of generous. CBW, what's going on? Why not? Is Daboll a great offensive mind? Bryce could be a great offensive mind. Yeah, that is a good point. That's a good one. Tanvir, hope I'm saying that right. Bowen needs to go too. Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. I'm surprised that he didn't go as well, to be honest. I'm very disappointed. But, if Kafka comes in here, he's got full autonomy, I assume, over his staff now. If he decides to fire Shane Bowen, the Giants win a few games down the stretch of this, the back end of this season, maybe he deserves to continue being head coach. That's the first step in his potential. I find it extremely unlikely that he becomes the full-time head coach of the Giants after the season. I just don't see it happening. But that would be the first step to him somehow getting that job. Wabistics, what's up, my man? I agree with Jim. He isn't a good offensive mind at all. LMIO, years of terrible scoring offenses, then a year or two of Josh Allen bailouts. Yes, it's a good point. Candy Hunt says Bowen should have been fired before him. IMO. Yeah, I mean, I think that there was an opportunity from Brian Daboll to make Shane Bowen the scapegoat behind everything that was happening in the season, especially after the 33 points allowed by the Broncos. But I think maybe there was a conscience to him, being like, well, it's not Shane Bowen's fault that we have a terrible defensive coordinator here. It's not his fault that a team gave him a job like that. It's Brian Daboll's fault. As I said earlier, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, Brian Daboll's not taken seriously in the NFL. They were not able to get a good defensive coordinator because no one wants to coach for him. He's a maniac. And he lacks the maturity needed to be a head coach in the NFL. This isn't Nick Sirianni, where he's surrounded by amazing coordinators who he cedes, he cedes the floor to them. Yes, Nick Sirianni is a joke. He's immature. But he lets his coordinators do their jobs. He's not all in their faces. He doesn't have beef with them. They don't disrespect him. We all saw what happened with Wink Martindale. And it wasn't like Wink Martindale was a world beater of a defensive coordinator. We were yearning for Wink Martindale because we had Shane Bowen, and we still have Shane Bowen. But look at the defensive metrics of the Giants when Wink Martindale was here. They sucked at everything besides takeaways. That helped them stay in games, but when push came to shove, they weren't a great defensive team. Under Shane Bowen, they're that much worse. James says, Mara should be talking with Lane Kiffin, Charlie Weiss Jr., Matt. Did I just read that last name right? Where even is Matt Patricia right now? I think he's with, is he not with Ohio State? Come on, dude. I mean, that's one of the biggest jokes I've ever heard in my time. Matt Patricia? Yeah, because his head coaching reign with the Lions went so well. Yeah, let's bring him in. I had to. Sorry. Wellesley said, "Ella, no, he shouldn't go get a proven commodity. That dark friend. No draft of Shane wows me, but with Mara sick, I could see him stay." It's a good point. Kafka's a work. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's worth a look, 100%. That's why they fired Brian Daboll. He had nothing to lose. Jeff, yeah, Kafka, I appreciate that. I saw that. And your point about the team being better than under Gettleman is a good point, but the picking Banks, yeah, I mean, but here's the thing about that draft and that move. It was at Wink Martindale's urging. And to be honest, Deonte Banks showed some flashes during that first season, his rookie year. He did. And then Wink Martindale and Brian Daboll have that falling out, which should have signaled to you everything you needed to know about Brian Daboll and how seriously everyone takes him. Look at this. We got. I'm sure you guys hear that. This is amazing. We got the fire department and the police going to the celebration downtown of Brian Daboll getting fired as the Giants head coach. Listen, I'm happy. I'm relieved. I'm relieved. You couldn't afford to fully lose the locker room. And as I said before, there were no real signs of that. You know, you heard all the players saying the right things. I'm sure that Jackson Dart and Brian Daboll have a really good relationship. But I'm also sure that Jackson Dart, being a guy who, like anyone, is a psychopath, quarterbacks in the league. I mean, you see the hits that he takes to try to win games, get first downs. He's a psychopath. He wants to win. And I'm sure he could see the writing on the wall here too. He comes out of the game. He put the Giants in a great position to win. And Brian Daboll couldn't do enough. He couldn't get enough out of his players to win that game. So I really just don't think that, this is going to kill Jackson Dart's, morale. I don't know if if he even knows that Brian Daboll's fired. I don't know if he's even able to think straight with that concussion. Didn't look good. Probably won't play next week. Remains to be seen. But I'm happy. And I'm sure I'd find it hard-pressed to find anyone that doesn't feel the same way as I do. Yes, I understand there are people out there who want Joe Shane gone too, and I understand that. And I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong in that belief. I tend to agree with you. I do. But I want to focus on this. I want to focus on Brian Daboll being gone. I think I just come around to this because, again, there are plenty of people out there who blame Shane Bowen, rightfully so, for what has happened this year. But again, the Giants were not able to go out there and get a better defensive coordinator because Brian Daboll is a joke of a head coach. No one respects him around the league. They see him as a maniac. And the Giants, Joe Shane, needed to save face by firing him after what we witnessed yesterday. He had to go. Sometimes it's that simple. Sometimes there are a multitude of things at play, and sometimes, there are a bunch of intangibles and yada, yada, yada. And sometimes it's as simple as you can't lose that game, you're gone. And that's exactly what we're witnessing right now. And I know that Daboll was actually supposed to speak at 1:30. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen there. I don't know if Joe Shane's going to speak. I don't know what's going to happen. If there's any news that you hear, I'm keeping an eye on Twitter, but let me know in the comments because obviously I'm doing this. And I'd end it before because I want to hear what whoever is going to speak has to say if they do speak. I just The Broncos loss was 3 weeks ago now. Lost to the Bears was less than 24 hours ago, and I just don't think as a fan, like a really diehard fan of a team, like I don't think those types of losses are easy to get over. I think yesterday was more easy to get over than the Broncos game. But like even if it benefits you more to lose because then you have a higher draft pick and all the talent the Giants already have, they could trade down and get a bunch of different players, impact players, second round guys. They can replace Greg Van Roten at right guard. They want to, they can replace Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle. They can add to the secondary. They can finally send Deonte Banks bum ass to the sun. And yeah, I do have a Deonte Banks jersey hanging up. That's kind of like a running bit that I have now. When the Giants lose, the Banks jersey hangs up. And when they win, I've got another Giants jersey, Victor Cruz, that hangs up. By the way, that's not my jersey. My roommates both went to Maryland. One of them is a huge Giants fan. Of course, when the Giants took the number one cornerback from Maryland, he bought a jersey. And of course, he regrets that now because this guy is the worst player in the NFL. And like the Giants continuing to employ him is just as much of a Joe Schoen problem as it is Brian Daboll. That's another indictment on Joe Schoen and the mistakes that he's made, which I think you could say outweigh the positives. The one thing that is helping Joe Schoen right now is the talent on the roster. It masks a lot of mistakes. The Evan Neal pick, the Banks pick, Trey Hall. I mean, we could go on and on and on and on with all these busts. And it's very difficult to not lose sight of that. Like it's very difficult to look past that. Joe Schoen has effed up plenty of times. Look at this team on paper. They have like 4 players on the team that are top 3 in their positions. Like Dexter Lawrence hasn't had a good season. It seems like he's mailed it in. I think next year with a competent coaching staff and more talent surrounding the Giants, Dexter Lawrence will return to form. I think could be far-fetched, but I believe it in my heart of hearts. Brian Burns, Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Abdul Carter is a rookie. He will get better. He will improve. And then you have Malik Neighbors, who's the top 3 receiver in the NFL. Oh, and the Giants have a quarterback now. Oh, and Cam Scatterbo, if he returns to form after his injury, could be a top 5, top 10 running back in the league. Unless we forget. I can't believe I just did. Andrew Thomas. So 5 players at the top of their positions. That's what is keeping Joe Schoen in this position right now. That dark friend. I don't even know if I'm able to say that name. I was done with Daboll middle of last season. It was inevitable. Guy can't run a team, develop players, or build a staff. Fair. Banks, Steele, and Hyatt need to go behind BD. Let's fill a bus heading out. I mean, I drive them to Newark right now. I could go pick them up in East Rutherford. I'd pay for the plane ticket. I'd do anything to get these guys off the team. And, we read the report earlier last week that the Colts checked in on Deonte Banks. And the Giants, instead of taking whatever the hell the Colts were offering, decided not to trade Deonte Banks. I don't care if it's a 7th to 6th round pick swap. I don't care if it's cash. Like, I don't care what the hell it has to be. I don't care if it's like a washing machine or a bag of Doritos. You trade Deonte Banks for whatever you could get. Just bad voodoo. It's bad vibes having him on the team. I don't know if you realize the first drive from the Bears yesterday, their entire offensive game plan was throw it to whoever the hell Deonte Banks is guarding. And it worked. It worked. They got 2 big completions to start the game because Banks got cooked on both of them. That's who you continue to employ as a depth rotational guy. you accept whatever the hell you could take. And Evan Neal is another like redemption project. You know, the Giants were never going to trade him to the Eagles, but there are a multitude of other teams in the league that maybe could have turned him into a better player. Even a Carmen Bricillo as offensive line. But here's the thing about Carmen Bricillo. I think looking at everyone around the team, like there's a lot of dispensable guys. There's a lot of, expendable guys in the team. Carmen Bricillo needs to be retained. He has to be retained. I don't care what it takes. You pay him a lot of money. He has been the best coordinator on the Giants. By far. Not even close. What the Giants have been able to do without a competent interior offensive line has been nothing short of amazing. So no matter what moves the Giants make, you got to retain Carmen Bricillo. You have to. And it's not his fault that he hasn't been able to develop Evan Neal. He's trash. He's garbage. And just a massive swing and a miss. Like everything jumped off the page. The intangibles, the size, the versatility from his time at Alabama. It was a can't miss pick. And sometimes those picks just don't pan out. Like, yeah, it's a stain on Joe Shane's legacy, but like, the guy had everything. The guy had everything. Was the number one ranked offensive tackle in that draft. And it's just unfortunate because you draft him and then, the next couple of years, you get these amazing tackles at the top of the draft, even the year before. Joe Alt, Will Campbell, like these are top of the line offensive linemen. Offensive tackles. And the Giants got screwed with the Evan Neal pick. Can you imagine? The Giants had a top 5 right tackle in the NFL. With Carmen Bricillo working his magic. They'd be in a pretty good freaking spot to win. And I started this saying I don't really want to talk about Joe Shea, but it's almost impossible. You can't avoid the elephant in the room. And he's staying. And this shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. Shouldn't. This is something that almost every media member from the Giants has signaled. Daboll would be gone. Shane would stay. And it's just, what's also really funny? It's going to be very intriguing. The NFC East is on in-season Hard Knocks this year. So all of this is going to be documented. Which I think is pretty funny because, the Giants, of course, had the public disaster of the offseason Hard Knocks that no one wanted to do and no one will ever do again because of how terribly incompetent the Giants look. Now they're going to get effed in Hard Knocks again because of this incompetence. But I don't really care about that. I don't care. Sure, that might give the Giants a bad look, but this is the right move. This puts the Giants in the best possible situation to win. And I could sit here and bore you with stats as to how bad the Giants have been. You can look up those records yourself. You don't need me to really spell that out for you. Sure, the majority of you are diehard Giants fans like myself and watch almost every game. Like if you've given up on this team and stopped watching, I don't blame you. The only reason I watch is because I'm a big fan, but more importantly, because I host a podcast. So I have to sit through and take notes on games and, take in what I'm watching. And what I've watched is pure ineptitude from top to bottom. And there's a reason why the Giants now sit at 2-8 and just fired their head coach. Is that the first head coach firing this year? Is that the first one in season? I don't think it is. I don't think it is, but let me know. I feel like I should know that, but yeah, I don't think he is. Either way, a very rare move from the Giants. Titans, yeah. Yes, I knew I was wrong there. This was a few weeks ago. But this is it's very rare for the Giants. You don't see this too often. But it was entirely deserved. It was expected. It needed to happen. And I'm very glad it did. The head coach sets the tone. He doesn't control how well the players play out there, but he motivates them to go out there and play well. This isn't Madden. He doesn't have the controller. He can't make Deonte Banks magically better. He can't up his attributes. I get that. I understand. He can't make Shane Bowen a more competent defensive coordinator. He can't do that. But he's the head coach. He sets the tone. At the end of the day, everything comes back to him. And he deserves the blame for all 4 of those collapses on the road for the Giants this year. The Giants should be 6-4. Second in the NFC East. In good position to make the playoffs. Instead, they're 2-8, and the head coach just got fired. I said earlier on, if the Giants beat the Eagles, the Giants are not a laughingstock in the league anymore. Well, turns out I was wrong. They still are. And I can't sit here and tell you that I expected those collapses against the Broncos and against the Bears. I really felt like they got their shit together after the win against the Eagles. Biggest franchise win they've had in years. I thought that was putting them in a great position, to look like a more competent organization going forward. But the Giants brought us all back down to earth. They brought us back to reality, and they lost multiple games they probably should have won. The Giants did get screwed in the Eagles game. There was a chance that they could have won that game. The Broncos, whatever happened there. I don't want to sit here and make excuses. I'm not going to. I'm not going to do that. But what I can do is to tell you they flat out should have been better this year. And yes, the Giants lost the Cowboys game. They lost the Broncos game, mainly due to what Shane Bowen did, playing prevent defense at the end of both those games. You're telling me the head coach can't be like, hey, this is stupid. Let's change the play call. But he didn't. And I keep harping on this point. The Giants are stuck with one of the worst coordinators in football, not because of Joe Shane, because of Brian Daboll. The fact that he is a maniac. The fact that other coaches don't respect him. He is the reason why the Giants lost the Cowboys. He's the reason why the Giants lost the Broncos game. Because Shane Bowen is a complete, utter idiot. He's a dumbass. And that's all on Brian Daboll. It's not anyone else. You can't put the blame on Joe Shane for that one. The head coach has the ability to hire whoever he wants to hire. I can fire whomever he wants to fire. At the end of the day, Brian Daboll chose to stick with Shane Bowen. And look where this has gotten him. And yeah, I mean, I look back to what happened yesterday, and my biggest gripe with the Giants in that loss was Brian Daboll's decision to kick a field goal in the fourth quarter. Instead of going for it on the half-yard line with Russell Wilson. I understand Russell Wilson's incompetence. I understand that he just doesn't have it as a quarterback. I understand the limitations the Giants had in the red zone earlier on in the year when Russell Wilson was the quarterback. I get it. Trust me, I understand that. Brian Daboll knew that his job was on the line. He knew this could have happened. If he went for it, the Giants didn't get it, it would have been bad. Okay, I get it. But it was 10 times worse because he kicked the field goal and the Giants still lost the game. Like, congratulations, you went up by 2 scores. You still lost. It was a pussy move. I said this on One Giant Step. We did a reaction pod. Of course, that's not, that's not evergreen anymore because Brian Daboll's out. But it was a good breakdown of the game and big picture stuff. But I said the second the Giants decided to kick the field goal with Younghoe Koo in that spot, the game was over. The game was over. That was it. It signaled to the team, we are playing not to lose, that I'm a pussy, that I'm desperately trying to hold on to my job, that I'm not the same head coach that was extremely aggressive, that went for it all the time, that where my aggressiveness became my calling card and would help me get to the point where I won a playoff game in my first year and won Coach of the Year. And we've seen in the last 3 years that aggressiveness is gone. And it's not a personnel thing. The Giants didn't have an amazing roster in 2022. If you want to sit here and tell me, oh, it was because of the easiness of the schedule, sure. That shouldn't change anything. If anything, they should be going for it more, considering the fact that, you got to win these games. And you can't sit back and play not to lose and expect it to go well. So I'm going to keep coming back to this. I'm going to continue to harp on this point that this needed to happen. There was plenty of justification for Brian Daboll getting fired. I wish it happened earlier on in the day, but I'm happy it happened nonetheless. Sorry, I'm just going to keep checking my it sucks because the Giants, congratulations. Tim McDonald, still employed by the Giants. If you expect this team to get any more competent, Chris Mara, also employed by the Giants. The nepotism has to stop at the Giants. It has to. It has to stop. And this has just killed them. It has. Because any GM who comes in, hey, you got to deal with my nephew and my son. F you. You can't fire them. No, you can't. So if you do, I won't hire you. How's that working out? How is that working out? Not well. Tim McDonald was hired in 2013. You know what happened the year before? They won the Super Bowl. You know what's not happened since? Success. One playoff win in 12 seasons. And I'm not saying that he's the only catalyst for all this, but when you submit to nepotism, it's not a good look. It's just like why the Giants lost that game yesterday. It was just bad vibes. Some things are that simple. Kicking that field goal, hey, you know what? F it. We're going to lose. That was it. Yeah, I could sit here and break down the X's and O's and all that kind of stuff, but you don't want to hear that. You want to hear big picture stuff. And I want to talk about big picture stuff because the head coach just fired. And I just did almost 40 minutes on this. And, this is a long time coming. And I'll be the first to admit that I was wrong going into the season, where I thought that Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen deserved another chance. That they deserved, with the roster they built, to go out and select their own quarterback. And in some way, I was vindicated. Like in some way, and not in some way, it completely worked out. So I was right. I wasn't right about them bringing back Brian Daboll as a head coach because I thought he was competent. I was right because they brought him back and he was the one who scouted and ultimately took Jackson Dart. And I think that alone will earn him a job as an offensive coordinator somewhere else. Again, when there's less pressure, when he's not the one leading the team, when his idiocy is not on full display, when he's not hiring his own staff. But I think that this as bad as this went, I think this is best case scenario. If he was fired before the offseason, before the draft, I think it would have been a lot more difficult for him to get an offensive coordinator job in the immediate future. But he drafted Jackson Dart. And Jackson Dart is the future of the New York Giants. They finally got their franchise quarterback. It was 21 years since they drafted Eli. It was that long since the Giants had a franchise quarterback or drafted a franchise quarterback. Eli won 2 Super Bowls. Amazing. Pretty average quarterback. Besides those 2 playoff runs. One might say that he was never like top quarterback in the league. Well, it looks like Jackson Dart might be and could become that. Because in all these games where it seems like the Giants have broken down, Secondaries getting exposed. Dexter Lawrence unable to break double teams. Abdul Carter unable to get to the quarterback. Anyone being able to bring the quarterback down in general. Jackson Dart has kept the Giants in these games. There's obviously the argument to be made that if he was an idiot and didn't fight for that first down yesterday, the Giants could have won that game. Sure, fine. That's who he is. And he's going to have to learn from his mistakes. He's a rookie. It is what it is, but this cannot continue to happen. Hope that this, kind of is an epiphany for him. Like, hey, I don't want to get concussed again. I don't want to turn into Tua. I don't want to have CTE at 50 years old. So you got to stop playing this recklessly. And listen, we'll see. I'm interested to see how this goes. Brian Daboll's been the coach for a long period of time with the Giants. And I think it's funny because, obviously we saw in the beginning of June, Tom Thibodeau fired from the Knicks, and I just wanted to see a different look. I want to see a different look with the Yankees. Not going to happen. But I think it's just important sometimes to freshen things up. Now, I'm not comparing this to Tom Thibodeau. Tom Thibodeau took the Knicks within 2 games of making the NBA Finals for the first time in 26 years. Way different situation. Even more of a reason why Brian Daboll should have been fired. And he was. Congratulations, guys. Let's give all of ourselves a pat on the back, especially the ones who were correct in saying that Brian Daboll deserved to be fired either last year or going into this season. You were right. You were right. We will cross the bridge of Joe Schoen when we get there. We will. Don't get me wrong. I wanted to talk about him. I did cover him somewhat. This is about Brian Daboll. He was the one just fired. I understand Joe Schoen was retained, but that was never not going to happen, right? Everyone and their mothers knew that Joe Schoen was lasting until the end of this year, at least. So let's wait it out. Let's see. Let's see. That's all I got to say. And I'm looking forward to having that conversation when we have that conversation. You're going to want to tune in. You're going to want to follow me on don't follow me on Instagram. Follow me on Twitter. Subscribe to me on YouTube. This is just going to come all the time. Like, I know the Giants season's over, but stuff like this, there's a lot to analyze on a week by week basis, even though they're 2-8. Like, this feels like a different 2-8 season. It does. It's not like let's tank, let's lose. Like, there's, emotion in each game. What happened yesterday, the loss wasn't that bad for the Giants. Just, it eventually got the head coach fired, so it really wasn't bad. Makes me feel a little bit better about what we witnessed yesterday. But there's a lot to be discussed. So stay tuned. If you haven't already, check out One Giant Step. Myself, WFAN's Sean Morash. We do previews and we do reactions. Yesterday, we did a reaction posted on YouTube, did really well. That was one of our best podcasts. It captured the mood correctly. There was anger, frustration from both of us, but I think we both were able to play off each other extremely well because of this. But all right, that's it. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And I will speak to you all very soon. More Knicks stuff. I got it. The Giants have been at the forefront of my mind. The Knicks look really freaking good. The Nets suck. Destroyed them last night. Mike Brown has this offense humming. That's a positive. This is a negative. I guess a positive, but the Giants as a whole are a negative. I understand. But if you're a Knicks fan, stay tuned for that. And we'll all talk very soon. Thanks.